My name is Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager at Fairygodboss, and Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a ton of great free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help you succeed throughout your career. We will be taking questions at the end of today's webinar, so feel free to leave them in the Q&A. You'll find that as well at the bottom of your screen. And you can leave questions anonymously or with your username, so feel free to ask anything that comes to mind. We'll also be sending out a recording of today's webinar later today, so if you miss anything, you want to watch it back, or even share it with a friend, you'll have the ability to do so. Here with me today is Stephanie. She's a self-described recovering rocket scientist and money nerd. Stephanie is a member of the Financial Independence Retire Early community, aka the FIRE community. She started investing at 18 and retired at 32 from a career at, get this, NASA and SpaceX. Yes, that is where she retired from. Stephanie then founded her company, Money Muse, with the sole purpose of helping other women reach financial independence. She speaks at events all over the US and works with women one-on-one as a financial coach. Thanks so much for being here today, Stephanie. Over to you.
Yay, I'm so happy to be here. Are we basically ready to get started?
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So thanks again for the intro, and thanks to Fairygodboss for having me. We're going to talk about investing today, which is my favorite topic to talk about in the money realm when it comes to women. I find that more and more there are money articles that are geared towards women. Women are definitely joining the conversation about money. But I find still that the majority of the articles that are geared towards women are about budgeting or even increasing your income, how to save more money. And I really like to focus on investing and also, tracking your net worth, because I believe that investing is the financial tool that allows women to make generational change and to have generational wealth, which can really change your life. And investing, I think, is something that just used to be kind of in the back, kind of like smoke and mirrors. You had to hire someone to do it for you. You had to pay them a lot of money to do it. So I like the idea of kind of bringing it out into the light. And so I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you guys about that today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I like to start with my story every single time, because when you hear recovering rocket scientist, you might think that I'm some weirdo who maybe learned everything I knew about money from my parents or my upbringing. But in reality, everything I know about money, I know because of fear. And so if you go to my website, themoneymuse.co, I have this story in my About section, but I share it at every single workshop, even though it still makes me nervous to share. So I grew up an only child to a single mom, and we were really poor when I grew up. And eventually my mom met a man when I was around 12 years old, and he was good looking and he was smart, and best of all, he was on a good career path. So for the first time, we really started having money in our lives. Before that point, I really didn't have, my own room. Sometimes I was sharing a bed with my mom. Things were a little uncomfortable, and I didn't love to have, friends over, things like that. So suddenly, with my stepdad in the picture, we were living in a house. I had my own room. I thought it was really awesome. But my stepdad ended up being kind of an asshole, to be frank. And he was drinking, being abusive to my mom, and eventually to me too. And so we had to move out. And again, my life was kind of thrown back into this chaos of, sharing an apartment with my mom that smelled like secondhand smoke, and feeling a lot of shame about money, and not wanting to have my friends over to my apartment. And unfortunately, while for the first time I felt safe in that environment, it didn't last long, because after a few months, my mom sat me down and basically said that she didn't have enough money to keep us out of the house. So after a few months, we moved back in with my stepdad, and I had like a total changing point in my life then. I remember going home and writing in my diary that from that day forward, I was going to be independent, that I would never rely on anyone, that I was going to be smart, that I was going to be rich. And so you can imagine the emotional impact on a young teenager to go through something like that. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Because of that experience, I really was motivated to be independent and to be good with money. And so at 18, I got myself out of the house and into UCLA. I chose to study physics because I thought it was the hardest major, and if it was hard, that meant made money, right? So that was a mistake. But I opened my Roth IRA at 18 with $50 and started teaching myself slowly to invest, and went through all of the various stages, from having a financial advisor to trading all of my own investments on my own. So, I really went through kind of the normal process, and then just kept trying to learn more and more. And so I found myself at 32 with enough money saved in my investments to live on the rest of my life. I left my job at SpaceX at that point and kind of was like, well, now what do I do? And I decided to found my little business, Money Muse, to help other women reach financial independence, because I want to be able to offer women the opportunity to learn about investing from a place of desire rather than fear. So that's my story. Whew, glad that's over. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the fun bits. So here's where we're headed today. We're going to talk a little bit about women and money. We're going to do a little imagination exercise, because imagining our future really does help inform our decisions today. We're going to talk a little bit about spending and a lot about investing. I'm going to give you my list of favorite resources, and then we'll save time for questions. So Sam already said this, but as you have questions throughout the webinar, you can just send them directly to her via the Q&A feature. Maybe some of you are tuning in your pajamas. I hope we're taking advantage and making the best of our working from home situations this week. All right, so let's start with some statistics. So I always share this because I think it's really food for thought. So among those 75 years and older, twice as many women as men live in poverty. There's a lot of reasons for this, and some of them are more prevalent in society, in the conversation. For example, I think most of us have probably heard that women make on average less than men, right? So I believe the statistic's about 79 cents on the dollar on average. But there's other factors at play as well in this. So we also tend to spend less time in the workforce. So on average, we spend 7 years less working. That's because of things like caring for children, having babies, and also taking care of aging parents, things like that. We also statistically tend to marry someone a little bit older than us. And then when that person retires, they kind of look over at us and like, hey, you coming to hang out on the boat or what? So we usually retire a little bit earlier at a little bit younger age. And then on top of all that, we live longer. So we're making less money, we're working less years, and then we have to stretch it out longer because we're living longer. So that's some of the reasons why, especially for women, money can be hard when we're older. Another thing that is a little bit in the conversation is that I think money is not a super comfortable topic for many of us. I was recently on a podcast with some friends who are in the wellness industry, and just knowing that I was coming to talk to them on the podcast, they were like all nervous because they knew we were going to talk about money. So at least in my household, I definitely didn't grow up, where money was like an okay thing to talk about openly. And usually a lot of the people I'm talking to had the same experience. So women especially, I think we're taught to, one, be polite and not talk about money openly. And then two, not to prioritize money. Or somehow we think that if we do take care of our money and we are prioritizing it, that we're selfish or greedy or something like that. I hear from a lot of my clients things like, shouldn't I be spending my time, and money on my kids instead of my own retirement? Or isn't it selfish to be putting money away for myself in the future rather than spending it on, other things? But I truly believe that the only way to show up 100% at your job, to your partner, to your kids, to all the relationships in your life, and even for yourself, is to have your money taken care of so that you can operate from a place of freedom. The good news is things are really changing. So more women than men are graduating from college, more single women than single men are buying homes, and this is like at early ages. Women are better investors. So on average, when we do start investing, we have higher returns, which is really good news. So we tend to start investing a little bit later, but once we get invested, we tend to do a little bit better. And I love to think about all of the potential reasons that this could be, but I won't wax poetic on that today. All right, so let's get to a little imagination exercise. So hopefully you have a pen and paper. I'm gonna ask a couple of questions, and I want you to just completely brain dump anything that comes to mind. The purpose of this exercise is really to craft like a vision of yourself in the future and what's possible, so that can help you inform your decisions along the way. So the first question is, what are your priorities? So I'm going to set a timer. I want you to just write down absolutely anything that comes to mind. It doesn't have to be about money. I'm going to do it too. Just absolutely anything in life that you consider to be a priority. All right. The next one is, I want you to imagine that you have infinite funds, and I want to think about what that would feel like. So if you knew that you had enough money saved and invested that you could live on that the rest of your life, how would that feel? All right, and the next one is, imagine you're 70 years old. What does the perfect day in a fabulous life look like? What are you wearing? What are you doing? Where are you waking up? Who are you with? What are you eating? All the things. All right, so using the chat window, I would love if you guys shared maybe a little bit about what are your priorities, what are some of the things you wrote down. I know for me, health, travel, being able to be creative, feeling free, those are some of the things that I always think of when I am thinking about my priorities in life. Also like personal growth and learning, so being able to invest in education, learning new skills. To own a home, yeah. That one's getting tougher and tougher in the cities these days. I think someone wrote financial security, peace of mind, friends that make me happy, a satisfying job, graduate school, being able to take care of parents. Yeah, all important things. Making sure my kids don't grow up worrying about money like I did. Yeah, super important. A really awesome goal. Being able to positively impact my community. Yeah, that's a nice one. All right, what about, imagine that you have infinite funds. What would that feel like? I know for me, you know, the first part of my life where I was saving and investing lots of money, I was worrying a lot about it. So my hope was that once I had enough money, I would just feel completely free. Empowering, freedom, less worry, more security, a huge relief, confident. Yeah. So as much as people like to say things, you know, about money and how it doesn't buy happiness, like money does buy us some things, and it's safety, security, being able to operate from a place of knowing that you're going to be okay, which I think is really important. All right, last one. Imagine you're 70 years old. What does the perfect day in a fabulous life look like? I know I'm probably waking up beachside with a big window that's open. I'm in like my custom designed linen pajama set. I've got my dog, my husband, my cat, some coffee, surrounded by children and grandchildren. That sounds lovely. Ability to travel. Breakfast on my balcony with a sea view. Yes, yes, see, we have some things in common here. Oh, I also want a chef. I need someone to be cooking for me, so I don't have to cook. Volunteering, yeah, that would be lovely. Relaxing with coffee. I'm feeling the vibe. A personal assistant. Lots of coffee drinkers. Yeah, wearing a bathing suit, maybe a cover up, maybe. Don't go too far. Just bathing suit and coffee, really, it sounds like. Awesome. Okay. So, yeah, like I said, this exercise really is to help you figure out who you want to be and what your life could be like if you were financially independent. I'm going to refer back to some of these priorities later when we're talking about actually spending our money. But for now, let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about spending, and it really is just a little bit. So I like to say that spending isn't money out the door. Spending is an investment in present day you. And I'm quoting myself because I can do that since I'm running this webinar. Ha ha. So here is the Money Muse model. So in this model, 80% of your net income, which is your money after taxes, you spend on present day you. And then 20% of your net income goes to future you. So future you is that woman on the beach sipping coffee, right? So every dollar that's coming in, you're either choosing to invest it on present day you or future you. And the 80-20 model is a pretty good split. Financial advisors used to recommend 10% of your money be invested in future you, and they're upping that now because we're living longer, and also we're expecting that maybe the returns in the US market will go down a little bit in the future. Nobody knows for sure, but in general, if you're able to save 20% of your net income on future you, you have a very good chance of being able to retire. And then of course, if you are investing more than 20% of your net income, then that sets you up for an early retirement. So maybe retiring in your 40s or 50s, anytime before that normal like 67 number. So that's the split. So spending, every dollar you spend is an investment in present you, but it's also an opportunity to express your priorities and values. So whatever it is that you wrote down in that first question, for me it was health, travel, freedom, self-expression, and learning. Those are the things that I would want to actually see reflected in your spending plan. And I don't like using the word budget too much. But when you sit down to actually decide what you want to be spending your money on, that's the question I want you to ask. What are my priorities? What are my values? How do I want to be spending my money? You also need to remember that it's an investment in your happiness. So like present day you requires spending money to be happy. Some things bring us more happiness than others. I know Instagram loves to try to sell me this shower cap, and for whatever reason, like I was very interested in the shower cap at first. I've never owned one, but I thought for a minute, maybe I really need this shower cap on Instagram. I'm glad that I didn't end up buying it because I have a feeling that the impact on my happiness would have been very short-lived. But some of the things we spend money on have the opportunity to make us happy for years to come. One example I like to give is I almost didn't go through bar teacher training after I left my SpaceX job and retired because it was like $1,500. And I thought, $1,500 is a lot of money to teach bar classes. I'll probably get paid like 30 bucks a class. Will I ever make my money back? But it was one of the best things I ever spent my money on because one, it taught me a new skill I got to learn. I got to teach. I was making playlists. I was meeting people in my community. It was good for my body, my mind. So in the end, it ended up being one of the best investments in present day me that I have taken in the last few years. Every dollar you spend is also an opportunity to be mindful. So I want you to kind of increase the level of mindfulness around the spending. I'm not asking that you change your spending at all, just to look back maybe over the last month and ask yourself, like, how happy did these things make me? And how long did that happiness last? Was it like a 10-minute happiness or a 2-day happiness? Or am I still really psyched about that money I spent? So really just bringing some more mindfulness to it. And then every dollar you save or invest is an investment in future you. I want you to keep that fabulous lady in mind when it comes time to actually plan the money that you're going to be investing. So let's talk about investing. That was the end of the spending section. We're on to investing now. So why do we want to invest? Why do we need to invest? And the answer is the power of compounding interest. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm using the Charlie's Angels as a trio here. It turns out there's not that many famous trios. The other options were the witches from Hocus Pocus or the Powerpuff Girls. You never know who's in the audience. So I just went with the Charlie's Angels. So here they are. After their big movie break, the Charlie's Angels set aside $500 a month from age 25 to 65. Jacqueline on the left here, I put it in a savings account, probably like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, where she was earning 0.1% interest. Kate in the middle here put it in a high interest savings account or an online savings account, and she was getting about 1.5% interest. And Miss Farah over here on the right put it in an IRA and invested it in the US stock market, which has a historical average of 10% annually. So let's see how they did. So what did they have at retirement? Well, Jacqueline retired with $244,980. And you can actually see this was in her, Bank of America or like normal savings account. The blue money is the money she put in, and that little strip of green is the interest she made on her money. So not too much interest. Kate, with the money in the high yield savings or maybe a CD, ended up with $329,180, and you can see here the blue is the exact same amount as the blue here on the left with Jacqueline, but she made a little bit more money in interest. And finally, on the right, Miss Farah Fawcett. Farah retires with $3.194 million in her IRA after investing in the US stock market. And so here is the magic of compounding interest. It's all of this green that's here, right? So the blue, the amount of money that each lady put into her account was exactly the same. But because the interest was much higher on the US stock market account, by the time Farah actually goes to retire, most of the money in there isn't money she worked for, right? It's the money that her money made. So this is what we mean when we say making your money actually work for you. All of that green is your money just doing work on its own while you're going out living life. So that's the compounding interest. That's the true magic and the special sauce of investing. And that hopefully is enough to convince you that it's worth it. One thing to keep in mind too is, of course, there's inflation, right? So in the savings account, by the time Kate retires, she did make a little bit of money in interest, but most of that money in interest would be canceled out by the fact that her dollar doesn't go as far by the time she actually retires. And so that's another reason why investing is super important. So the first thing to ask yourself, if you're already convinced that investing is a good idea, and I hope you are, the first thing to ask yourself is, am I actually ready to invest? Or what should your priorities be? So I like to break this up into phases. So in phase 1 would be paying off any high interest credit card debt and starting an emergency fund of $1,000. So this phase is really focused on paying down any debt. When I say high interest, I mean like above 10%. So credit card debt is usually 17% interest on average. If you have student loan debt that's like between 5 and 10%, that's in the gray area. If your student loan debt is under 5%, then I wouldn't count that as part of phase 1. This is really just paying off any high interest credit card debt. Maybe you do a balance transfer, maybe you refinance, things like that, but really getting rid of any debt that's above 10% interest. And then also having $1,000 in an emergency fund. And the whole purpose of that is the next time that you go to use your credit card on something that came up, you know that you have $1,000 to pay it off. So you get out of the loop of putting things on your credit card that you can't pay off. So that's phase 1. If you have this phase covered, you are ready to invest. So the next part, phase 2, is investing in retirement accounts, things like 401ks, IRAs, and building up slowly an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months expenses. And this is not like every single thing that you spend every month. This is like the bare minimum expenses, the money you need to live on times 3 or 6. So that emergency fund can be built up at the same time as you're investing in your retirement accounts. You could split the money that's coming in evenly between the two. You could put more in one or the other till you get it there. It's kind of up to you, but eventually you want to have an emergency fund with 3 to 6 months of expenses in it and just be consistently putting money into your retirement accounts. Now, if you have all that, then you get to phase 3, which is, investing money just in straight brokerage accounts, which are not tax advantaged like our retirement accounts, and also other savings and investing goals. So college for your kids, real estate, down payments, private jets, whatever floats your boat. So that would be phase 3. We're going to go over some quick and very thrilling terms here. So stock and bond, what does it actually mean? Well, a stock is equity. So if you buy a stock, let's say 1 share of Amazon, you are actually a partial owner of that business. So stock can be thought of as equity, meaning you literally own a piece of that business. Then there's bonds, which is AKA debt. So when a company needs to raise money, they might say, hey, will you lend me some money? And you say, okay. So it's almost like an IOU. You're getting a little bit of money back on that bond, and whoever took the money from you is essentially in debt now. The next one is a mutual fund. A mutual fund you can think of as just like a basket, a holding place, something where you can put other stuff inside. So you can put stocks inside, you can put bonds inside, you can put both, but a mutual fund is really just a holding place for putting other stuff inside. And then there's a special kind of mutual fund called an index fund. These tend to be really low cost. And they're low cost because you're not paying for some fancy person in a suit somewhere to decide what goes inside. Instead, they're just putting in a whole index or list, right? So an example would be the S&P 500 index fund. Nobody's deciding what goes in there. You're not paying for anyone's time. They're just putting all 500 of the biggest, most badass companies in the US inside. And you're getting it for a very low cost. On the flip side of that, there are active funds where someone in a suit somewhere is saying, put in Amazon, but don't put in Yahoo, things like that. And you are paying them for that expertise. And sometimes you can pay up to about 1%, which is a very high fee, we will learn here soon. But an index fund is a very low cost way to invest. You get a lot of things inside of that mutual fund. And so it tends to be a good investment because it has low fees and it's also diversified. So those are just some high-level terms. We're gonna get to use them in a minute. Okay, so let's start with investing principles. So the most important thing is to literally start now. Time is your best friend. You do not need to know everything about investing to get started. I like to give a metaphor, an analogy. I don't know, I'm not a writing English person. It's like a salad. We eat a salad and we know that it's good for us. And we don't have to know exactly, how the minerals and vitamins are broken down in our body. We just know that it's good for us, or we believe that it's good for us. So similarly with investing, you don't have to understand every single little piece of investing to get the benefits of investing. So starting now, as soon as possible, even if you don't have the exact perfect investments, is better than waiting till you understand everything. And I know us ladies, because I hear it all the time from my clients, they're like, I want to invest, I'm sitting on money, but I want to really understand what I'm doing before I do it. And so I would try to convince you that truly you don't have to know everything, and just starting now is the best possible thing. Next is that fees really matter, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. So you want to choose mutual funds that have low fees, and those are those index funds that we were talking about. And the next thing is to diversify. So you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. You don't want to put every dollar you have in a single company like Target or whatever. Insert your favorite company here. Because if something happens to that company, then suddenly all of your money, boom, is lost, right? So you want to put a little bit of money in a lot of things and then just wait and let it roll. So two ways that are really easy to diversify. One I said is just owning index funds. So you can pick a mix of index funds based on your age. This is a Googleable thing. You can literally just say, what asset allocation should I have for my age? Or what index fund should I own at age 35 or whatever? Or you can get help. But one option that's available is a target retirement date fund. So this is a special type of fund that takes your age into consideration and puts exactly the right amount of stocks and bonds in it. So based on your age. And then as you get older, automatically the bonds will go up and the stocks will go down, so that you literally never have to do anything ever again. You just say, I want to open an account, I want my money to go into this target date fund, and from then on you can just cover your eyes and walk away, which really is the magic of investing. So that is the easiest one and done option for someone who wants to start investing and doesn't really know too much about it. So those usually have pretty low fees, but again, you need to check to see what kinds of fees are on these target retirement date funds, especially in your 401k, because depending on your 401k, you might have really awesome investing options, or you might have kind of terrible investing options. So again, just checking those fees. And the last thing is just to set it and forget it. That's truly the magic of investing. It's not boring, it's not sexy, it's just setting it up and then letting it roll. All right, so let's talk about fees. So fees really, really matter. So let's go back to Miss Farrah Fawcett. She did everything right, or so she thought, but she was too busy being famous and fabulous to learn about investing, so she hired a financial planner. He took 1% as his fee, and she paid another 1% in expense ratios. Maybe she had some of those fancy mutual funds, or maybe she even had an expensive active target date fund, but she had funds that had about 1% in expense ratios. plus the 1% she was paying to her financial planner. So instead of that $3.2 million we were talking about earlier, she was left with $1.8 million. So I know 1% sounds like a very small fee, and 1% is the industry standard, or the average that you would pay if you had a financial advisor. It's also the average for an active mutual fund. So a mutual fund, again, where someone in a suit somewhere is picking what goes inside, 1% is about the average fee. And a 1% fee over the lifetime of your investments can eat up about 25% of your total returns. This number will fluctuate depending on how much money your money is making each year. But either way, if you're taking 1 or 2% off the top of your 6 or 7 or even 10% return, like that ends up being a big chunk of your money. So just be super careful about fees. If you've been investing a while, I would say this is the thing that I would recommend that you look into. What kind of fees you're paying on all of your investment accounts, especially old 401ks, and especially if you have a financial planner. Okay, a little more quick and thrilling retirement account lingo. So the thing that confuses people the most is actually going to be contained in this slide. So when we're talking about accounts, there are different types. One is an IRA, an individual retirement account. That is an account that you, as a human who is working, regardless of whether you own a business or work for a corporation, are entitled to open on your own account. So you would literally log on to some big brokerage like Vanguard, Charles Schwab, E-Trade, and open your very own individual retirement account. On the flip side, if you are working for an employer, you might be getting something like a 401k or a 403b or a TSP. They come by a bunch of different names, but the important thing to know is it's a retirement account that's tied to your place of employment. So if you have one, it's because your job said, hey, we're offering you this benefit, whereas the IRA is one that you just open on your own. So those are account types. Then there's the tax treatment. So there's two kinds, Roth and traditional. So here's one way to think about these. Back in the day, the government was like, oh gosh, people are not saving for retirement and we can't support them when they're old. What should we do? And someone was like, I know, we'll create a special kind of an account, a retirement account, where they can put money in it, and any money they put in, they can take off right off on their taxes that year, and they won't have to pay taxes on it. And then it can grow and grow and grow. And then in retirement, when they actually take out the money, then they'll pay taxes. And they called this the traditional IRA, or just IRA. And then a few years later, some guy named Roth was like, oh my gosh, what if we do it the opposite way? We have them put money in now. They'll pay taxes now. It'll grow and grow and grow. And then at the end, when they take the money out, they won't owe any taxes. So that's the difference between Roth and traditional. Roth is just paying taxes today. Traditional is just paying taxes later. And usually you can get a 401k in both types. So you could have a 401k that's Roth and a 401k that's traditional. You could be contributing money to both in the same exact year if you wanted. And same with the IRA. Most of us, by the time we actually retire, will have both a Roth and a traditional IRA. I also like to call the IRA a forever IRA because you open it on your own. It stays with you for life, regardless of what you're doing with your job or employment. And then anytime you leave a company, you can roll your old 401k or TSP or 403b, whatever it is, into your forever IRA. So one thing to note is that if you have a Roth 401k, it would roll into a Roth IRA. If you have a traditional 401k, it would go into a traditional IRA. So we don't want to mix up the tax treatments because then that would be a taxable event. But just know that IRAs and 401ks usually come in both types, and you have to choose whether you want traditional or Roth. One other thing to know about the Roth is that there are no penalties for early withdrawal. So if you decide after this talk today that you want to retire at age 40, a Roth IRA would be really nice to have because you could start pulling money out of that, the money that you put in, before the age of 67. So there are also no penalties, which is really nice. Okay, so what if you're brand new to investing? Let's say you just got your first job or your first well-paying job where you finally have a little bit of extra money on the side. You negotiated your salary, you're real proud of yourself, so now what? What do you actually do? Well, here's me at age 18. This is where I like to remind you that, trust me, you do not need to be an expert to start investing. So the first thing is to decide Roth or traditional. And this is something that holds people up all the time. Which one should I do? And the thing is unless we could predict the future, there's actually no way to know for sure which is better for you. In general, a Roth is good when you're in a lower income tax bracket, and a traditional is better at a higher income tax bracket, because you would want to pay taxes now if you were in a low tax bracket, and in the future, hopefully when you're making more money, not pay taxes. But we can't predict where income tax rates are going. However, we do know that they are historically low now. So that makes the Roth look a little extra shiny. It's like, ooh, what if we could pay taxes now when the rates are low, and then they'll go up in the future and we won't pay taxes. Anyway, there's calculators online. This is actually a link to one that you can look up whether Roth or traditional is better for you. And it's going to be estimating based on your age and your income. But ultimately, there isn't a wrong answer. If you end up with both types of accounts when you retire, that's great. The next is to get the employer match. So if your employer offers a match, that is free money, right? It's the only time in the world where you put in $1 and you're guaranteed to get $1 back, or 50 cents, whatever it is they promise on your employee match. So this, even if you have credit card debt, this is the one time when it still makes sense to put money in your investments, because the return could be 50 or 100%. And we're always, comparing the return on the investment to the interest rate on our debt. So normally when we're investing, we're only getting, let's say, 10% average on back. But with an employer match, we're either getting 100% return because they're putting money in on top of it, or maybe a 50% return if they say for every $1, we'll put in 50 cents. Either way, the employee match is a deal that you cannot ignore and should not ignore, and should do anything you possibly can to get, especially if you're just starting. The next is to open your forever IRA. So do like 10 seconds of research on the internet and decide where you want to open it. There's no wrong answer. You can choose Vanguard. They have really awesome low fee funds. You can choose E-Trade. They're really easy to use. All of these big institutions are going to offer you those low fee index funds. So there's really no wrong answer. Some people like to choose the place of their forever IRA just based on the user interface. Again, the important thing is just that you are able to invest for low fees there. So Vanguard, E-Trade, Charles Schwab, all of these are great options. So open that IRA that will stay with you forever. And then remember, anytime you leave a job, you roll the money from your old job's 401k into your forever IRA. All of your money is in one place. It's easy to manage. Yeah. And next is to pick a monthly amount. So actually look at your income after taxes on your paycheck and decide what % of my money do I want to invest. Choose a number. And then based on that number, set up your automated investing. So you shouldn't have to be deciding every month, do I want to invest this month? That kind of defeats the purpose. Every single month, automatically money should just be going into your retirement accounts. With something like a 401k, that's going to happen automatically at every paycheck anyway, so you don't have to think too much about it, but you still need to pick that money amount. And then finally, just pick a mix of index funds or a target date fund. I promise that you won't screw this up. Even if you just picked a single index fund, like the S&P 500 index fund, you would still own 500 companies and you would be relatively well diversified. But if you're going to pick just one, the target date fund is usually the thing to pick because it is meant to be a one and done fund and will cover your bases for life. Here's an example asset allocation for someone that's more than 10 years from retirement. So maybe this is the most of us. So this is what it would look like if you were to choose your own mix of index funds. So you can see here they recommend 25% in large cap stocks. That just means big companies, 15% in medium companies, 15% in small companies, and 25% in international, 10% in something that you choose. So maybe you're interested in real estate or socially responsible investing, and 10% in bonds. So for each of these categories, there is an associated index fund. So let's say you open your IRA in Vanguard, you could split up your money to be 25% in large cap, 15% in mid cap, etc. But one thing you need to know is that if you actually choose this asset allocation for yourself and get it all set up, this requires that you go in at least once a year to rebalance. Because let's pretend that that year large cap stocks did really well in the market. and international did really poorly. After the year goes by, you might find that your large cap stocks are now like 35 or 40% of your portfolio because they grew so much. And international, because it didn't keep up, could only be 15%. So this is definitely extra work. You have to decide exactly what percent of your money goes in each category. And then you have to go in at least once a year to keep up with it. So this would be a little bit more work than just choosing the one and done target retirement date fund. And there are pros and cons to both, but there is no wrong answer. But just know that if you want to just invest in one thing and walk away and live your fabulous life, that the target date fund is the absolute easiest thing to choose. So if you decide that you need help, I'm just going to talk about your options, because more and more these days, like, there are more options coming out of the woodwork. So the traditional and most expensive option would be hiring a financial planner. So again, like we talked about before, you typically pay them a percent, usually 1% of your assets every single year. So that over the lifetime of investing with a financial planner, you end up spending about $800K to $1.3 million. These numbers are based on the example we used earlier of investing $500 a month over the lifetime. So 25 to 65, $500 a month. If you invested that amount of money and you paid a percent to your financial planner, you would end up spending $800K to $1.3 million on that financial planner. And we had said before that the total return would be like 3.2 million. So that's a pretty big chunk of the money that you would have been able to keep that would go to your financial planner. And this is why financial planners are such a great business, right? More and more now, there are other options coming out. In the middle here is using a robo-advisor. So things like Ellevest, Wealthfront, Betterment, Wealthsimple, I get these questions all the time. So they are less expensive than a traditional financial planner. Typically, they will charge you between 0.25% and 0.5% instead of 1%. So it is less expensive. But you don't have someone to actually talk to about your investments, right? You just get a robot who's just investing you in whatever based on your age. And over the lifetime, given the exact same $500 a month investing, you would end up spending about 200 to 400K depending on that fee. One thing to keep in mind too is typically these robo-advisors are just investing you in a mix of index funds, right? So you're not getting anything that's too magical. They're just doing that work for you. That last slide where you saw all the different categories, they're just going to put you in those things in index funds, and you're going to pay them that 1/4 or 0.5% of your money every single year for doing that for you. And then the least expensive, there are financial advisors that these days will do work for you on a fee-only basis. And you want to look for that word fee-only. So that means that they will basically run some analysis for you based on an hourly rate and give it to you. It's usually between $2,500 and $10,000, depending on what you want them to do. And so this is a good option for someone who does want an expert to weigh in on their investments. Maybe you have a big chunk of money and you don't feel comfortable investing it on your own, then a fee-only financial advisor could be a good call. With any financial advisor, you want to make sure they're a fiduciary, which means they are obligated to act on your best interest. And finding one can be a little bit tricky. So there are some gotchas there, and so, but looking for someone who is fee only is usually a really safe and good bet, because like I said, you're going to pay them a one-time fee, and even though $2,500 to $10,000 can sound like a lot, it's a heck of a lot less than $800K to $1.3 million. So even if you saw a financial advisor like this every 10 years or every 5 years to check in, it still is a lot less expensive. And then the least expensive would be hiring someone like me, like a financial coach who's actually going to be teaching you to invest. So as opposed to actually taking your money and managing it on your behalf, it's sort of like the giving a person a fishing pole instead of selling them a fish thing, right? It's like, I will teach you about investing to the point where you feel comfortable to do it on your own for life. So financial coaches are a pretty new thing, as are fee-only financial advisors. So these, again, are just set costs that you sit down with someone and you learn about investing on your own. Or in the fee-only financial advisor case, they usually would give you a list of investments and then you would go out and actually do the work yourself. So those are kind of the options if you decide that you want to invest, but you still need help. And then there's always Google, which is free. So literally that's how I taught myself to invest. So much of my investing knowledge has come from Google and podcasts and from, reading things on Reddit, stuff like that. So just know that that's an option, and it is a smart option. It's not dumb to be looking on Google to try to figure out how to invest. And I will also include in my resources a list to some of my favorite websites for learning about investing as well. So in this list of resources, you don't need to rush to write this down. After the webinar, you will be getting a link to basically sign up to get this list. So this is something that's on my website. But there are so many great books and podcasts to learn about money. With money stuff, like it really is just hearing things a few times and then they'll start to make sense. Like all of the fake names, IRA, 401k, these things that maybe they were created just to confuse us, who knows? You really just need to hear them a few times before you start feeling like, oh yeah, I remember this, I got this. So this is my list. And then finally, you can use me as a resource. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm always talking about different money things. I'm Money Muse with 2 underscores because I'm extra. No, because Money Muse with 1 underscore or a dot or a space or anything else was taken by other fabulous 12-year-olds, you know, who are talking about money on the internet. So yeah, if you have questions, you can always DM me. I do a whole bunch of money related fun things on my Instagram. And then if you're interested in one-on-one financial coaching, you can reach out to me and check out my website to learn more about that. Again, that is all just education-based stuff. So teaching you how to do your own investing, teaching you how to make the decisions, coming up with a financial plan. So yeah, here is my website, themoneymuse.co, and I'm Steph at themoneymuse.co. And the final thing is that truly, I believe that you got this. For a long time, you know, financial planning and the financial industry was like this smoke and mirrors industry where you didn't know what was going on, and that's how they were able to take so much of our money. A lot of the financial services industry is still kind of trying to make things sound difficult and complicated so that you'll pay them to do it. But in reality, this stuff is simple. If you decided that from this day forward, you were going to put $500 in an IRA or 401k every month, and you were just going to buy the target date fund that was made for your age, that would be good enough. So really, it truly can be very, very simple. But there's a lot of information overload out there. But truly, if you're interested in financial independence, I believe that you got this. Like you can definitely do this. So that's all I have prepared for you today. And now I'm prepared to answer a bunch of questions, which is kind of the best part since I've been talking so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephanie. What a great presentation. And we had a lot of questions come in, so keep them coming. We'll get to as many as possible. So let's start off with a really simple question from an anonymous attendee. Can you open an IRA with other people?
I'm not sure what you mean by other people, but you can open an IRA wherever you choose. So let's say you work at a job and you're offered a 401k. You can then go open your own IRA somewhere else. So maybe the 401k your job gives you is with Fidelity, and then you go to Vanguard and open your own IRA. That's obviously just an example. But yes, you would be the person that on your own, you go out and open your IRA.
And then I guess just for sake of, I'm not entirely sure. If you want to leave clarification, that would be great. You know, like a joint bank account, would you be able, I think that's what they're going for. Would you be able to open an IRA with your partner?
Oh, okay. So typically IRAs are opened in your own name. So you and your partner could each have your IRA in your own name. And then depending on how you manage your finances together, you could decide whether, you know, you're going to choose an amount to contribute between the two of you and split it evenly, whether you're going to contribute, you know, the same percent, each 20% of your income, or however you want to do it. That's usually based on kind of how you guys are managing your money, but they are typically tied to just you, and then both you and your partner could open them.
Great. Cool. Another question that came in from Lori. Lori, it's not a dumb question. A lot of us are beginners here. She asked, if I want to invest outside of my 401k, how do I get into stocks independently?
Oh, okay. So outside of your 401k, first of all, the question is like, what accounts do you have access to? So the first one is the IRA. So you could be putting a bunch of money in your 401k if you want. You could also be opening an IRA and putting money in there. And then if you still wanted to invest beyond that, then we're in that phase 3 portion, right? Where it's just investing in a brokerage account, which is essentially like a checking or savings account that happens to let you put money into investments. As far as your other question about like how to figure out what to actually invest in, you mentioned individual stocks. So I don't know if that's something that you are trying to invest in, but just know that that is like the absolute riskiest form of investing. That doesn't mean it's wrong. I actually am mostly an individual stock investor, but it is a lot riskier, and you should already have a well-diversified portfolio before you start getting into that.
Yeah, I mean, just the note there, if you're going to pick one company, you got to know what you're doing. I don't know much about investing, but I know that much. Great question here. Is the target date fund for when you want to retire, or the age you're expected to retire by the government?
Right. So I would say to choose, the way it's intended is to choose the date you're expected to retire by the government. And the reason why is, let's say like you're hoping to retire like in 10 years. If you choose a target date fund that's 10 years away, you're going to be in mostly bonds, and you're not going to be making too much money in there. So usually you want to choose it to be out to when you would typically retire.
Got it. This is a great question from an anonymous attendee. I started saving later in life, 33. How much should I be saving monthly to be able to retire at a reasonable age? And I know that's going to differ for a lot of people.
Yeah, so the normal recommendation is 20%. And if you're starting a little bit late, then anything you can do to save more than 20%, and when I save, I actually mean invest, to invest more than 20% of your income will help trying to catch you up. So that might mean, you know, reducing your expenses for a little bit, or trying to increase your income even more. But yeah, the 20% is a guideline for someone who starts, you know, let's say in your 20s to invest. It's impossible to predict the future and see like how the investments will do. And of course, it's really specific to you and your situation. But the general guideline is 20%, and then more than that if you're starting late or you want to retire early.
Great question here from Amanda. She said, can you just quickly review some pros and cons for investing in stocks versus bonds?
Yeah, so the thing about stocks are higher risk and higher return on average, and bonds are lower risk, lower return. So in general, if anyone says that there's an investment that's low risk and high return, that would be a big question mark for me, because the entire point is risking a little bit more for potential returns, right? So that's the main differences between stocks and bonds. Most financial advisors or financial professionals would say that everyone should own both. So when you're older, you want to have more bonds because you're actually getting closer to need that money and like live off that money. When you're young, having more of your money in stocks is okay because you have a really long timeline ahead of you for that money to be volatile and growing and kind of up and down. But the main thing is when you actually get close to the time when you want to take the money out, then you want to have more money in bonds so that you know it's going to be there when you need it. When you're young, far away from retirement, stocks is where the growth is. And when you're young, you know, that's really what the focus is growing the money so that you can live on it later. There is a calculation for that. It's 120 minus your age is the amount you should have in stocks. So using me as an example, we'll just say that I'm 35 to make the math easy. So 120 minus 35 is 85. So according to that calculator, 85% of my money should be in stocks at age 35. There are plenty of people who actually don't believe you need bonds until like 5 years till retirement, because that's when you're actually going to start needing that money. But that's kind of a smaller percent of the population. But most people would recommend having like 10 or 15% in bonds until you get closest to retirement.
Got it. And then just a quick clarification question on saying that, you know, you should be saving about 20% of your income. They wanted to know, is that before or after your taxes?
So this is a funny one. So a lot of times they don't specify, but I think it should be of your net income. So if you're looking at your paycheck, or if you're an entrepreneur, you're taking your income minus your taxes. And then if you're working for yourself, minus your business expenses. But if you're not, it's just minus your taxes. So on your net income, 20% of that is a good goal for investing.
Okay. I think that's a good rule of thumb. And I see a lot of questions coming in kind of around that same thing. So I hope that answers everybody. If it doesn't, feel free to leave a clarification. And again, we're getting to as many as we can, but there are so many questions. So I will send out contact info for Stephanie after this so you can connect with her and ask for all your questions. Another question that I saw that I really liked here. Oh, you mentioned IRA and 401k. Are you suggesting it's best to have two different retirement accounts? And what is the percentage amount you recommend investing in a 401k with your company?
That's a great question. So the thing about having an IRA and a 401k at the same time is the IRA is your forever IRA. You got to choose where you open it. You get to choose the investments inside. You have all the power. However, you're only allowed to put $6,000 a year in your IRA. So if you wanted to be investing more than 6K a year, the 401k, if you're offered that, is a good option. The 401k has a limit of $19,500 a year. So between the two, you could be putting in about $25,000 a year. So pros and cons, well, sometimes you have a really crappy 401k. It depends on your company. You might find that you have a 401k where all of the investment options are like 1% fee. They're all active funds. Or maybe just the account management fee or the administration fee is 1%. So some people don't have the option of having a good 401k. And so then investing in the IRA is a good option. But it's still better to invest in a 401k with crappy investment options than just investing in a brokerage account, because you're still going to be getting those tax advantages and those tax benefits of only paying taxes once. So depending on where you put your money first, it kind of depends on how good your 401k is. The IRA is something that if it was me, I would just have it set up to be maxed out from here on forward, which is $6K a year or $500 a month. That's something you can just set and forget. And then if you want to invest more, the 401k is a good option. And if you want to invest even more, then opening a brokerage account at the same place where your IRA lives is another option. And then when you leave that job, you roll the 401k into the IRA, and then you get a new 401k with your new employer.
You just kind of touched on this, but I saw this question come through. Do Roth IRAs have a maximum contribution limit until you hit a certain age?
Yeah, so the Roth or traditional IRA, you can put $6,000 a year in until you get to age 50, and then it bumps up from there. And the 401k, similarly, it's $19,500 a year, whether it's Roth or traditional. And you could do half and half if you wanted. But yeah, so between the two, there's about $25K that you can put into retirement accounts that will be tax advantaged every year.
Awesome. Okay. A quick question that I think is on everybody's mind. Do you have any tips for people who want to invest right now with, the current situation, the current economy and outlook and all that?
So, I mean, whether investing right now while there's a little bit of a drop in the market is not a bad idea. The main point to investing, though, is to invest regularly, right? So like, it's great if you can invest a little extra this month while the market is down. However, in general, that would be called timing the market, right? So we want to have our investments just set up so that every month it's happening. If you right now are interested in doing a little extra investing, either putting money into your IRA or your 401k, you could bump up your 401k contributions a little bit. You could open an IRA today, like with Vanguard or Charles Schwab. It'll take you like 10 minutes and set up to get invested in there. And then if you already have those two things and you want to invest extra, then again, the brokerage account, you could open a brokerage account with one of those big institutions in like 5 minutes and start getting invested. If you have no idea what to invest in, then that goes back to the target date fund, something that's just created for someone your age, or even just buying an index fund like the S&P 500 or any stock-based index fund.
And then this is our last question because I see we are running out of time here, but I've gotten this question like in 3 different variations. So I think it's top of mind for a lot of people. Should you always be rolling your 401k into an IRA after you leave a job, or is there any reason that you keep the two separate?
That's an awesome question. For me, I would always roll it over for 2 reasons. One, we know that in our forever IRA, we have the most choice, right? So we opened it where we wanted. We already have our investments set up the way we want. The 401k, we don't have control. So when we leave that job, if you roll it over into your IRA, now you get to pick all the investments and have total control. So that's one benefit. The other benefit is just having all your money in one place. Like, I have these clients who have like 4 old 401ks. They're like, I can't remember my login. I can't remember who owns it. Like, I don't know how to find it. So as a general rule, as soon as I would leave a job, I would roll it into my IRA. Then all of my money is in one place. It makes doing calculations to see if you're on track to retire easier. In general, it's just a lot less admin. So yeah, I would.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for your amazing questions. Sorry that we could not get to all of them, but keep them coming to Stephanie. I'll include her contact details in a follow-up email later today. And Stephanie, thank you so much once again.
You're so welcome. And then yeah, if you want to DM or email me your questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Well, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you learned something. Stay safe out there, and we will catch you at the next one.
All right.
Bye.